Alakshya recognize.
Paurai
Porai
by the citizens.
by the citizens.
Samprapta reaching Kurujangalan, the Kurujangala provinces.
Provinces.
Unmatta, mad. Mukha, dumb. Jaddavad, stunted. Vicharan, wandering. Gaja Sahvaye, Hastinapura. Panchali Mataji, you would like to read the translation and purport?
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, thank you. Translation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. How is he, Srila Sukadeva, the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapura, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded? Purport. The present city of Delhi was formerly known as Hastinapura because it was first established by King Hasti. Goswami Sukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it was very difficult for the citizens to recognize him in his exalted position. A sage is not, therefore, recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage, not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Sukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly, he appeared to be a retarded, dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna. We hand it over to you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you to Shashvan Prabhu as well. It's actually really nice how he's reciting the Mangalacharan and the prayers. You know, it's really nice. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity as well, Arigovind Prabhu. I know Kritika Mataji is obviously traveling and so on as well. So thank you for the opportunity. So this is a very, very interesting verse, right? Because if we just go through who's speaking this verse, right? Shaunka Rishi is speaking about Shukdev Goswami. And he's using words like Unmata Mukha Jadvad, right? Appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded, right? And the immediate thing that comes to my mind is like, how can Shaunaka call Shukdev Goswami these sorts of words, you know? Such an elevated personality, he's calling him mad, he's calling him dumb, retarded. And even in verse 4, the word used is Muda Ivayate, appearing like an ignorant person, right? What do we think about when we hear the words like madman or dumb or retarded, right? In material sense, what do we think of? We think of somebody whose mind isn't working properly, somebody whose mind is dysfunctional, you know? They're not aware of what's going on around them. Sometimes, oftentimes we will see like they're in their own world, right? They can't actually understand the way the world is functioning around them. They don't understand how things are acting, how nature is working. It's all because we do see that, okay, you know, these people that we called mad, dumb, etc., retarded, in its literal sense, not as a offensive sort of term, but in its literal sense, is somebody who has mental defects. They might have even lost their intelligence, right? And we see these words being used for somebody like Shukadeva Goswami, right? But we see through the past few verses, we see Shukadeva Goswami did behave like that, you know? He was walking around naked. Nowadays, at least in the UK, if somebody walks around naked, I recall an incident that happened many, many years ago. The police gets called, you know, because you don't walk around naked, you know? And just generally you could see Shukadeva Goswami's behavior is very much as if he's very ignorant about what's going on around him. And Shukadeva Goswami was even like mistreated, right? People used to call him names, etc., etc. And even in other areas of Srimad Bhagavatam, we see personalities like Rishabhadev, who's the incarnation of Godhead himself. After he retired from family life, he left home. Usually when people leave home, they go to a forest, they go to do some tapasya, some, you know, austerities, etc., to enlighten themselves. But he walks around. He's threatened, he's beaten, he's urinated upon, you know, he was spat upon. And oftentimes people would even throw things at him, stones, stool, dust, all these different things is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And people, the citizens would also call him names, and all sorts of names, because they didn't recognize that this was the previous king because of the way he looked, the way he was behaving and acting. And in fact, you know, if we see madness to its height, Rishabhadev, it wasn't just other people doing this to Rishabhadev. Rishabhadev himself would roll around in his own stool, in his own urine. You know, when we go to urinate or to go to our stool, etc., we don't even want to look at the toilet, you know, half the time. But here's Rishabhadev, he's rolling around, he's even smearing his own body with it. The height of madness, as we might see. And this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Rishabhadev. If we look at another pastime, there's Jadabharat, right? Anyone who saw him, he appeared dull, blind, deaf. I mean, it's as if he was a fool, you know? His father would try and get him to learn Vedic literatures and so on, so many different things. But Jadabharat would just act in the complete opposite way. It's like he didn't understand what his father wanted from him. He would even be insulted like a Brahmabandhu. Brahmabandhu means born of a Brahmana, but not behaving like a Brahmana at all, not even close to behaving like a Brahmana. So our scriptures are full of so many personalities like this. Is the Srimad Bhagavatam really a scripture that is boasting about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or is it a scripture that's really just full of madmen? You know, like that's a question that we can probably ask, you know. But the key to unlocking this thing is the word appearing. Everywhere we see, there's a reference to this personality appeared like a madman. This personality appeared ignorant. This personality appeared dull, blind, and deaf. So it's not that they actually were these sorts of, you know, descriptions. They appeared like those descriptions. And we can see in our own lives, like when many of us started the Krishna conscious journey, our Krishna conscious journey as devotees, I think most prominent, at least, you know, if I be selfish a bit, then I think the most prominent is for Prabhus, right? For us male devotees, because especially when we start taking on the Vaishnava attire, what happens? People, like, if we're walking on the street or whoever, they start thinking we're mad. Like, did he just come out in his bed sheets or something like that? You know, just wrapped his bed sheets around him. You know, oftentimes like the tilak, the clay, like putting clay on the head, like somebody's just gone mad. You know, he's just put his head in mud and just smeared mud all over him. Or the common one that all of us can probably relate to is that we're just walking down the street, going on public transport or something, bead bag in hand, hand in the bead bag, chanting, muttering under our breath, and people are looking at us thinking, has he gone crazy? He's speaking to himself, right? These are just tasters of what the personalities in the Bhagavatam actually go through and experience, both externally as well as internally. So how can we understand? There's a nice verse in Canto 5 of Srimad Bhagavatam. I'll read the English for this one. So after accepting the feature of Avaduta, a great saintly person without material cares, Lord Rishabhadev passed through human society like a blind, deaf, and dumb man, an idle stone, a ghost, or a madman. Although people called him such names, he remained silent and did not speak to anyone. What's the key here? These personalities are avaduta, right? They're above the social conventions like varnashram dharma, right? They're above the full varnas, they're above the full ashramas. So when they're called mad or they're behaving like this, it's the fact that they actually don't care or relate to it. There's those who are mad from a material sense, those who we'd say, okay, they'd be in the mental asylum or, thereabouts sort of thing. These sorts of people can't relate to the material nature. They can't relate to the world around them. They just don't have the ability to, because their mental capacity isn't there. But avadutas, on the other hand, it's not that they can't relate to the material world, it's that they don't. They're above the material world, right? And we can see the difference here in terms of a sunrise and sunset, right? They're two polar opposites. Sunrise on one side looks exactly the same as sunset, but what's the difference? In sunrise, the sun is about to appear or is on the verge of appearing, whereas sunset, the sun is on the verge of disappearing. So they look exactly the same, but they're totally the opposite of one another. And in the same way, when we see a mad person who's materially mad versus a Paramhamsa or Avduta, they're also polar opposites. We can see it as an Avduta is above and beyond the material nature, whereas a mad person is below. And that's the key distinction between them. The consciousness of an Avduta is transcendental to the world. So let's go on a walk now. Let's I don't know if you've got like any sort of mental rehab centers or anything like that in Eldoret. I don't know if you do, but let's say we're walking down the street and we come across a mental asylum, a mental rehab center. If we peer inside, we just look through the gates. What will we see? We'll see people who are, some are dumb, some are blind, some are deaf. But on the whole, most of them, we will see that they're all aloof from the world. They're not really able to comprehend or understand what's going on around them. So are they all elevated souls? Is it that they're all just appearing like madmen, but actually they're avadutas? Again, let's if we go to a verse, it's in Canto 7. Avyakta lingo vyaktartho manishun matta balavat kavir mukha vadatmanam sadrishtya darshayendrinam. Although a saintly person may not expose himself to the vision of human society, by his behavior, his purpose is disclosed. To human society, he should present himself like a restless child. And though he is the greatest thoughtful orator, he should present himself like a dumb man. So if we can't see the difference between a madman and an elevated man, how do we identify them, right? As this verse said, by his behavior, his purpose is disclosed. So we can understand by his behavior. And in the purport that we just read, right, from Canto 1, Chapter 4, verse 6, Srila Prabhupada elaborates on that. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. We can recognize the difference by Shravanam, by hearing them speak. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, we should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see him, but to hear him. And we can see in the case of Shukdev Goswami, right? I'm sure the pastime's kind of been narrated briefly, but we see when Shukdev Goswami came to Parikshit Maharaj and was starting to narrate, it wasn't just Shukdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, it's not that they were just having casual conversation. So many great personalities came to hear him speak the Srimad Bhagavatam. Personalities like Vyasadeva, who's the Brahma Rishi, right? Vyasadeva was also Shukdev Goswami's own father. Personalities like Narada Muni, Devarishi, also Vyasadev's spiritual master. These great sages, these great personalities, and Parshuram and so many others came. Some are even the incarnation of God himself, like Parshuram. They all came, and what were they doing? They were actually attentively hearing the Bhagavad Gita that Shukdev Goswami was speaking. So we can also see in Jadabharat's pastime, we hear that, well, we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that King Grahugana, just briefly talking about the pastime, King Grahugana was a king, right? He was a great king. And on one occasion, Jadabharat, who was behaving like a madman, etc., was passing by, and they needed somebody to help carry the palanquin that King Rahugana was in. So they grabbed Jadabharat, and he was helping to carry the palanquin. But because he was a Paramhamsa, he was very compassionate. So any sort of, ants, etc., he'd want to stay away from them. He wouldn't want to step on them. So in doing so, like, he'd carry the palanquin, but he'd constantly looking down, and he'd step over the ants and so on and so forth. And in doing so, what happened is that the palanquin would keep jittering, right? It wouldn't stay steady. And King Rahugana would then get angry, annoyed, and he'd start chastising Jadabharat for not being able to carry the palanquin. And just as when he's about to punish Jadabharat for his misbehavior, Jadabharat starts to speak. Out of his own compassion, out of his own mercy, he starts to speak. And when Jadabharat speaks, the king realized, oh, this personality who I thought was just a dumb fool is actually such an elevated soul. By the way he's speaking, I can understand that he's a Paramhamsa. And so the king starts to inquire and take not material knowledge, not material instructions, but spiritual instructions from Jadabharat. So then if we read on with the purport for our verse from today, from Srila Prabhupada, if one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. I repeat, if one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Shukadeva Goswami was a sadhu. He could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted juggery like a magician. The sadhus speak Bhagavatam as it is. Srila Prabhupada's given us Bhagavad Gita as it is. Why? Because he hasn't manipulated the Bhagavad Gita. And in the same way, the sadhus, they don't manipulate the scriptures. They present it in their way. They present it in a way that we can understand, but they don't manipulate it according to their own whims. And we have to learn to hear from these sadhus to get benefited, right? Otherwise, there's no profit, as Srila Prabhupada mentioned. There's no profit. If we don't learn to hear from them, there is no profit. So what is this profit? We can understand that there's 9 stages of devotional service from Prahlad Maharaj, right? Shravanam, Kirtan, Vishnu Smaran, etc. And the first one there is Shravanam, right? So it's the first one itself. That says a lot in itself. But what is Shravanam? What actually is Shravanam? So we just generally translate Shravanam as hearing. But in the purport, Srila goes on to elaborate. Shravanam means giving oral reception to the holy name and descriptions of the Lord's form, qualities, pastimes, etc., as explained in authorized scriptures like the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So Shravanam isn't just about just hearing, passively hearing. It's about actually receiving the holy name. It's about receiving the pastimes, right, from the scriptures. And by the fact that it's the first word, and kind of paraphrasing a few different points from Srila Prabhupada as well, we understand that Shravanam is the beginning, it's the foundation of practicing devotional service, right? If we think back to our own journey, how did we come into Krishna consciousness? Those who aren't born in Krishna consciousness. We heard devotees, maybe we heard a Sankirtan party, maybe we went to the temple one day and heard about, like the temple does Bhagavad Gita classes, Srimad Bhagavatam classes, then you slowly come into the process of serving, etc., right? Shravanam is the first key thing. And it's actually the foundational service that we have. I know it is service, it's devotional service. When we sometimes think of service, what do we think of? Oh, I need to go to the temple to serve today. I need to do some deity service. I need to do some altar service. I need to do some cooking service or cleaning the temple. We see all of this as service, but hearing scriptures or reading scriptures is also service, and that's something we often neglect. Oftentimes, and I see this a lot as well, is that we look at, I don't know if Panchali's on the call, but anyway, but oftentimes we think, oh, we've got so many different service activities to do at the temple. I need to go to the temple this evening to do this service. I need to do that service. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to hear classes, you know, because I'm serving so much. But actually hearing the classes, reading is also service, Baba, right? And like I mentioned before, our bhakti, right? It started with Shravanam, but also we see from Madhurya Kadamani that actually the beginning is Shraddha, right? The beginning stages is Shraddha, it's faith. But what is that faith? Is it just faith that, you know, something will happen, I will enjoy the process? It's actually faith and a firm conviction, in fact, that we want to, and a firm conviction to actually act according to the words that are given in the Shastra, right? To follow the instructions that are given in the Shastra. That's the faith, that by following the words given in Shastra, by following the instructions, it'll actually benefit us. But oftentimes we see, okay, you know, this devotee said this devotee said that, this devotee said that. But do we actually understand how much of it is based on Shastra versus, you know, sometimes it happens, sometimes based on their own speculation, you know? Can we differentiate that? How do we differentiate it if we don't read or listen to the scriptures, right? How can we understand what is it that we should have faith in? By hearing and chanting, right? By reading the scriptures, by chanting as well, because the process of chanting, I won't elaborate on too much, but the holy name itself cleanses our heart and actually goes through and helps us realize the scriptures without even reading. I mean, Gokesh Shodas Babaji, he was illiterate, but he had perfect knowledge. Why? Because he was chanting. So we can see, like, we can develop our faith in the scriptures, in the acharyas, in the senior devotees. Guru Sadhu Shastra, right? Guru and Sadhu are aligned with the Shastra. That's what makes them bona fide. And we can develop our faith in the process as well. And when we develop that faith, when we develop that firm conviction in the devotees, in the sadhus, Guru and Shastra, we can also develop an attachment and love for Krishna, right, and his associates. When we think of a loving relationship, right, then is it actually possible for us to love somebody who we don't know anything about? Now, I'm sure some of the members on this call are married, right? If we take the example of a marriage, there's two primary concepts, right? There's an arranged marriage and there's a love marriage. If we look at the arranged marriage side of things, then, well, what is that? So I know back in the olden days, I don't know how it happens now, but I know in the olden days, the boy and girl wouldn't have even met each other until the marriage date, you know? They'll be like, come to the mandap, come to the sacrifice, and that's where they see each other for the first. Sometimes even then, because the bride's sari is covering a face. The groom's also got something covering his face. So sometimes they don't even see each other at the marriage. And then after the marriage is done, that's when they see each other's face, right? They don't have love. How could they have developed that love? They haven't seen each other. They haven't met each other. They haven't spoken to each other. But the faith is built on the fact that, okay, the marriage is done, but the love will come afterwards, because once the marriage is there, now you see each other every day. Now you speak to each other. You hear the other person. You understand what the other person's like. And that's when the love develops. That's when the bond develops. And then we look at love marriages. Same sort of principle, just the opposite way around. Nowadays, people want to see, know, and understand and love their partner before they get married. But the aspect is still there. They still want to know the partner in order to develop love. Same is true for arranged marriages and love marriages. Any relationship, for that matter, to have a loving relationship, we need to know the other person. And there's three aspects here. There's the lover, there's the object of love, and there's the relationship or the bond that connects them, right? If you just have a lover and the object of love, but there's no bond or no relationship, how can the person love the object? You can't, because there needs to be something connecting them. There needs to be that link. And that link with Krishna is devotional service. And specifically to get to know Krishna, it's devotional service in the form of Shravanam and Kirtanam. So when we hear the holy names, when we read or hear the scriptures, then another amazing thing happens, and it's from the Shikshashtakam, right? Chetudarpanamarjanam. The heart gets cleansed, right? So that's the special thing about the potency of the holy name as well. the cleansing of the heart helps us to realize and understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we get that from scriptures by hearing and reading the scriptures, and also through chanting the holy name. If we also consider hearing, then well, what should we hear? You know, we've got Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, so many other scriptures as well. And actually hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the most important process of hearing. Now, why is that? If we think about how to develop a relationship with somebody, we need to get to know them. We need to understand them. We need to know what they look like. We need to know what sort of person they are. What do they get up to? You know, what hobbies do they have, etc. And that's what Srimad Bhagavatam gives us. It's full of transcendental knowledge about Krishna, about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his holy names, his forms, his pastimes, his qualities. All these things are there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I did a bit of research. Just my background just makes me go into like maths and stuff as well, right? So I was just looking at Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now we know, you know, at least those who have attended different classes or heard or read Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are many verses that are quoted from different scriptures in there. But if we see Chaitanya Charitamrita is actually a discussion between many discussions between devotees based around Srimad Bhagavatam, based around the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we go through, then there's around 11,500 verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Of those, 851 are Sanskrit verses which are quoted from other scriptures. Right? So it's a small, it's around 1%, less than 1%. But if we break that 850 odd up into understanding where are these sources coming from, and I haven't done this, devotees have done this, which is nice. Almost 400 of those 851 verses come from Srimad Bhagavatam. That's nearly half of the quoted verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita that come from Srimad Bhagavatam. That already tells us how much presence the Srimad Bhagavatam has in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? That, okay, yes, you know, there's not many verses, less than 1% of verses are quoted from other Shastra, but of that 1%, almost half of them are from Srimad Bhagavatam. And to give like a reality check on, you know, maybe, oh, you know, maybe there's 2-3 very close scriptures. No, 393 verses are quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam. The next highest is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu at 87, you know, less than a quarter. That tells us how important Srimad Bhagavatam is, even from Chaitanya Charitamrita, even from Chaitanya Leela, right? It's so important that almost half of the quoted verses are from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So how should we hear then, right? Now we understand, okay, Srimad Bhagavatam is very prominent in all our scriptures. The two primary scriptures that we have, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam. You know, of course, Bhagavad Gita is there as well. But even in Bhagavad Gita, we see that Srila Prabhupada in his purports is referencing the Srimad Bhagavatam a lot as well. The three main scriptures are all referenced a lot. So what do we do when we hear, you know? So there's, how many of us are in there? There's 14 of us in total on this call, right? Many of us have our videos off. What are we doing with our videos off, you know? Even in the temple classrooms, I don't know if you ever have classes on site. Obviously, because of COVID, it's probably all online now. But even at the manor, you know, many devotees come and sit and are present in Srimad Bhagavatam class in the temple morning program. But what do we do? You know, sometimes we're on our phones, sometimes we're texting. Is that the mood that we should be hearing Srimad Bhagavatam? Should we be, you know, looking out a spouse, like, you know, our partner on the other side of the temple hall, and they go, you know, time, you know, 10 minutes we'll leave or something like that? Should we be sitting there planning our day? Okay, you know, it's 8:36 now. You know, after this call will finish about 20 minutes. I have 3 rounds left. I'll finish my 3 rounds, and then, oh, I remember I need to call that devotee. I'll call him. You know, is that the mood that we should have? We see with Shukadeva Goswami, and when he's reciting, like, what are the sages? What is everybody doing? It's described that Sutta Goswami says. He uses the word nivishta. Nivishta means being perfectly attentive. Perfectly attentive. That's the mood that the sages are listening to Shukadeva Goswami. But what do? Perfectly inattentive, right? We're always thinking or doing something else, one or the other. You know, multitasking. In the name of multitasking, we focus more on the task and less on the Bhagavad Gita, you know. And I'm no exception to this. Yeah. Please don't take this as me instructing. This is for myself too. But this is what we do, right? If we turn to the pages of Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna say? Tadviti pranipatena pariprashnena seva. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively, right? What does submission involve? It means that we're attentive as well. It means that we're, giving respect to the person who's speaking, right? Pariprashnena sevaya, inquiring from him submissively. So the mood should be of submissive inquiry, attentive submissive inquiry. Therefore, we should be fully focused. And what does it mean to be submissively inquiring, though? It means that we should be trying to get a clear understanding of what's being discussed, right? Clear understanding of the subject matter that's being discussed. Clear understanding of the verse that we've just read or heard or whatever it is, right? Often it's said that if one of two things should happen when we listen to a class or read something. Number one, we should have questions. Oh, I didn't understand this. The Prabhu Mataji said this, like I don't understand what they meant by it, right? We should have questions. Or the second thing is that we should have realizations based off what was just discussed. Realizations doesn't mean, well, it doesn't just mean that, oh yeah, I remember that incident that happened. This is, something related to what Mataji is saying. No, realization also means that actually, yes, I understand what the devotee is saying. I understand now how I need to grow in my own devotional practices to get to the next level. How I understand how I need to come to the stage of being more surrendered to Krishna, right? So if we've heard or read something, but we haven't got questions or we haven't had realized knowledge, then we actually haven't heard or read properly. And this is, there was a message that I received today. It was a forward from like one of Srila Prabhupada's quotes. You have these sorts of groups and stuff. And Srila Prabhupada was talking about, it was a letter to a devotee, to one of his disciples. And he was mentioning how he never understood, at least initially, what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was saying. Right? He would attend his classes, he'd attend his lectures, but he had no clue what he was saying. It's not that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was speaking a different language. No, he was speaking Bengali only, which Srila Prabhupada understood. But what he was saying was beyond him, beyond Srila Prabhupada, But the key thing was that he was trying to listen attentively. He wouldn't go away. He would always just be there present listening. And that's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur really appreciated about Srila Prabhupada. That he tried his level best to really try and understand it seemingly and just constantly hear. He would never go away. So we should ask questions, not in a challenging mood, but in a mood of trying to understand, get a better grasp of what's being discussed, right? And with that, we should also be mindful of the speaker. We should be mindful of the subject matter as well. Conscious of time, so I'll end on one final purport that I kind of came across. It's Canto 2, Chapter 10, Verse 10. It's from the purport. When, however, the Mudas give submissive oral reception to the message of the Lord in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, transmitted through the channel of disciplic succession, such Mudas actually become devotees of the Lord by the grace of his pure devotees. So Srila Prabhupada saying that Mudas, who are Mudas? You can translate that as the unintelligent, or as Srila Prabhupada often uses the word rascal, right? The rascals. If rascals or unintelligent people hearing, giving submissive oral reception to these scriptures, to the narrations of these scriptures, if they can listen to them and also become devotees of the Lord, right? Then we as practicing or aspiring devotees, imagine what giving submissive oral reception would do for us, right? Imagine the wonders that giving oral reception, submissive oral reception would do for us. These are mudas who aren't devotees, who are not even thinking about coming into devotional service. And just by being submissive, by giving a keen ear to the message, they can become devotees. Then what about us, you know? So I'll end the class there. Hare Krishna. Any questions, comments, corrections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for this wonderful class. Are there any questions? Hare Krishna, devotees. Yes, Sandhya Mataji. Go ahead, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, and Hare Krishna, all devotees. Prabhuji, many times I've heard from Prabhuji say, you must be submissive and you must not ask question in a challenging manner, etc. But then we also recognize that there'll be a lot of mudas or rascals attending the classes. But I would feel that Prabhujis who have become so learned in the subject matter should be able to rise above, because sometimes people, when they, even though they are challenging, is because they are surrounded by Maya, may not understand all these rules, because they would understand these rules only towards the end of listening. So even if they were to ask challengingly, but the Prabhujis who are teaching, can't they, with their knowledge, rise above that level and not be so offended, but be able to tap into that rascal's mind and kind of be able to convey a message in a way that that will help them further. This is what I feel. Am I kind of wrong in my thinking? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the very nice question, actually, Sandhya Mataji. It's a very important point. What the question here is, what should the mood of the speaker be when the hearer isn't out of the standard, right? So what I've been talking about is actually the quality, the sort of position that the hearer, the listener should have, right? Especially we as devotees. But you're perfectly right. The speaker should be at a level where they understand what level the listener is at and be able to relate the practice of devotional service, the practice of bhakti yoga to their level. But oftentimes we will see that, you know, people will come, especially when you're out book disputing, etc. You come across many people who are challenging, you know, just challenging, oh, you know, like just a religion, a cult, and so on and so forth. The art is to try and get into their mind, as you mentioned, right? And find what is it that's making them click? What is it that makes them go, oh, you know, it's a cult, and have a derogatory sort of mood towards devotional service or Krishna consciousness, religion, etc. And try to weed that out and then respond accordingly. But the other thing that my mind's kind of, my mind or my intelligence or Krishna, whichever you want to say, is taking me to kind of respond on this fact is that sometimes we often think that, okay, you know, those who aren't practicing devotees, etc., they don't know what it means to submissively ask questions. Therefore, they're all challenging, you know. And oftentimes, even in some sanghas, you know, unfortunately, we do get, oh, you know, you shouldn't ask questions, etc., because they don't understand what a submissive inquiry is versus a challenging inquiry. But we can see, again, if we go back to the example on the street, somebody who's challenging, they're usually very forceful, they're usually very direct, they're usually trying to find a spot which the other person will get pinched by, right? And if not them, then somebody in the room will get pinched by it. That's usually the like generalizing sort of high level way we can see challenging. But submissiveness doesn't mean that we just, you know, glorify endlessly the devotee who's speaking. Submissive means that we're actually really trying to understand the subject matter. Now, again, if we go back to the case of book distribution on the street, come across somebody, they're asking many, many questions, but their questions are there to try and understand what is it that you devotees are about? What is it that the Hare Krishna movement is about? And that's I think where we should really focus ourselves is to understand the difference between what challenging and submissiveness means. So then we can respond appropriately as well. Because with those who are challenging, it's not that we come down to the level, as you mentioned, we should rise above it, but we should then also understand, okay, how much can I say that we even get through to them? Because oftentimes those who are challenging, they're not really interested in, you could speak to them for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, you won't get through to them because their mood is not to understand anything. Their mood is purely to try and put us down. I don't know if that answers the question, Sandhya Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, it does. Thank you, Prabhuji. Well, I also feel, Prabhuji, while you were talking, I think even though all Prabhujis are so learned, in Srila Prabhupada's books, at the end of the day, you are also a human being. And for how long can you be challenged, especially when you're so emotionally and, in every way so respectful to Krishna and everyone, and then someone keeps kind of poking you, it's going to affect you, because at the end of the day, we are still on Mother Earth, and we will be affected. Yes, Prabhuji, I understand, but I just ask because everyone says that all the time, so I just feel, because sometimes I know I can be challenging, so I just feel that I may not be put off for asking questions. But no, Prabhuji, you're right. If you don't mind, Prabhuji, could you please say the Sanskrit line again, which you said Shravanam Kirtanam, and then you said is going to purify the
Cheto
heart.
Darpana Marjanam.
Say that again, Prabhuji.
Cheto Darpana Marjanam. It's the verse 1 from Shikshashtakam.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Just wanted to add one thing off that, right, Mataji? We do, like as devotees, oftentimes our questions in some forums can appear challenging. So we do have to think about what that forum is. Is it the right place, time, place, circumstance to ask the question as well? So even though you might not intend it in a challenging way, other devotees might take it in a challenging way because it's not the right forum for it as well. So it's just something we as inquirers can try to be mindful of as well.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. I'm just inspired to add pastime of Srila Prabhupada, which I heard from Amarendra Prabhu's class recently. Srila Prabhupada would be visiting Canada, one of the temples, one of the places to start preaching program, and then they would have chosen a Christian, church for their activity, and then this will be organized by a person from an Indian origin. And then this preaching will be going on, and then Prabhupada will speak nicely, and everybody will accept. And ultimately, Prabhupada asks, are there any questions? And then this person who would have organized this very event stands up and then starts to ask a question. And he starts to sort of blaspheme Prabhupada and says that, why have you come here all the way from India, and then you want to convert all the Christians into Hinduism? And this was least expected by a person who has organized this event. And then and also he's from an Indian origin, and then he starts to blaspheme Prabhupada like this. And because all other, even the nuns and the church people would have accepted this Prabhupada's preaching very well. And then Prabhupada just does not comment much, and then just keep quiet. And after the program, Srila Prabhupada calls the devotee, and then wants to talk to him. But Prabhupada's close disciples says that why Prabhupada, why you have he's done he's blasphemed you, why you want to call him? No, I must have done something to him in my previous birth, so that's why this is the reaction. So Amrita Prabhu was saying that, you know, Prabhupada is a Golokavasi, and then he's so magnanimous to say something like this, that, you know, if he has done something to him and then he's getting the reaction. So we get to know from such you know, such great elevated souls that, you know, you have to be so humble that, you know, the questions whatever may be there, you know, if they are ignorant also, that, you know, the submissive nature of a devotee is like that. I just wanted to say that, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
That's an amazing question, Prabhu.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
I quite like two of the examples in this purport. When Sukadev Goswami is viewed as a madman and a retired person, all of that, you know, it is amazing when you start getting so engrossed in the Krishna consciousness, as Prabhuji was saying on the tube, if you're chanting and so people will think you're mad. But, you know, but even friends at social occasions, they invite you, but you are not really interested anymore in this sort of frivolities, you know, like in the past. And then you're called a bore, and why do you want to just sit at home and read, or why do you want to just go to the temple all the time? So I like that example. And then the second one is where Prabhuji says, love, the way love grows, and, you know, by hearing and chanting and so how the love grows. And my own example of that is I didn't really know who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was. I don't think I was interested. I thought, no, I only like Krishna and Krishna alone. But my friend, I heard from discourses, we should read these scriptures. So I started reading the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu scriptures, and I put them down and thought, no, not really. But somehow or the other, I went back to them. And, you know, just reading it, it really grows. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu really grows on you then, you know. So that topic of hearing and reading is so important, because that love grows for God so much, you know. So thank you for those examples, Prabhuji.
I'll be honest, Mataji, Primala Mataji, I had the exact same experience with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm like, I'm all for Krishna, but you know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's there, but, you know, I know he's part of the process. But no, just like you, it's the book that it's Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Teachings, I think. No, not that one. It was a book on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Bhakti Goswami that actually I first read. And that's the one that got me to really think, oh my God, you know, Mahaprabhu is like such a personality.
Yes.
So yeah, no, I completely echo what you said, Primala Mataji. So it's a wonderful process, actually.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhu. Panchali Mataji, you have a question?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. Just a kind of reflection, I don't know if that makes sense or not. Just on this purport and what Prabhuji was saying about the importance of hearing, it just kind of made me think how much importance the process of hearing is given in all of the Vedic scriptures. I mean, not just Prahlad Maharaj saying Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, the whole graces and bringing hearing right at the beginning, but the whole process, the whole thing of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, there's a bona fide guru instructing somebody else, the student, and hence the Bhagavad Gita, and hence Vyasadeva listened to Narad Muni and started writing the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the rishis listening to Sutta Goswami, who again from Sukdev Goswami, and then Parikshit Maharaj. The whole process, there are so many stories in Srimad Bhagavatam about just a dialogue, one person hearing, listening to the other. And it's very interesting that you brought in Chaitanya Charitamrita, because again, in that, when you look at the life of Mahaprabhu, right from his childhood, when he used to have those discourses during, with all the pundits by the side of River Ganges, those were all dialogues where he used to have, debates and discourses, and then later on, again, when his, more serious discourses or discussions or dialogues with Ramananda Rai or Sarvama Bhattacharya. So throughout the Vedic, we've just come across a few books, and I personally, I haven't even read. I just listen to the classes and hear teachers teaching me, and from the classes I hear, all I hear is, bona fide teachers are telling their students to listen and learn from that. And it's just a constant thread that runs through the Vedic scriptures, and that reflects on our day-to-day lives as well. Whatever we do on a day-to-day basis, unless and until we hear from somebody on the authenticity of something, we wouldn't go ahead and do it. So it's just kind of reflecting the fact how the Vedic scriptures advises us on how to live life through hearing.
Yeah, no, that's actually absolutely wonderful. And it's so true, right? All the scriptures, what are they? They're just conversations, inside conversations, inside conversations, inside conversations.
Yeah.
Even the pastimes, the whole point of the pastimes existing is so that we hear about a conversation from which we need to learn from,
True.
So it's a very, very nice reflection. Thank you, Bhattacharya Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhu.
There was one thing in chat from Panchali Mataji as well regarding time management. I know it's more of a comment, but if it's okay, can I just speak on that for a few minutes? Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So yeah, what Panchali Mataji mentioned in chat is very true. Like oftentimes we get so much nectar from just doing so many different services with the association of devotees, etc., that sometimes it's difficult to manage the time to try and find time to read, chant, etc., etc. But something which I think we can all relate to is that if we're not hearing about Krishna, if we're not hearing from the devotees, like, actual from the scriptures, or if we're not reading, if we're not chanting, then actually our service, we might continue on with the service, but it stops becoming devotional service at some point. And I'm differentiating devotional service from service. And that's why we need to really focus on making sure that for a few hours each day, we have some dedicated time for sadhana, if we generalize, right? Chanting, hearing, reading as the main things. Because like I mentioned before, if we are trying to be the lovers, Krishna is our object of love. The relationship is definitely devotional service, it's definitely performing activities like the temple service, etc. But we can do that and forget who we're doing it for. How do we keep reminding ourselves who we're doing it for? It's by chanting, reading, listening. So we should always make time, no matter how busy our schedule is, we should always think, okay, I need to find a way to put in my chanting, to put in my reading, to put in my listening on a daily basis, make it regular. And yeah, some days you might find, like Janmashtami is coming up, so I don't get time to read or listen and so on. That's okay, but as long as you have something fixed on a regular basis, then we should really keep that so that we can actually make sure that our service isn't just service, it's devotional service. So.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhuji, for the wonderful insights into the importance of hearing. If there are no questions, we've just closing on our time allotted. So I would like to close the session because we had Parth Prem Prabhu on the call, but I think he has left. So I will close this session. Also on the closing note, I was remembering Prabhupada's another pastime, a short one. Because when Prabhupada asked his devotees when they were distributing, so he asked him, "Whether are you reading my books?" Because he wanted his devotees, his disciples, also to read his books before even distributing the books. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for this wonderful nectar on the Srimad Bhagavatam on an important topic of how the devotee is externally there and internally there. Externally, he might be appearing as a madman, but internally in an elevated state of consciousness. So thank you again for this wonderful class. I request all the devotees assembled here to unmute and then chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra in glorification of Brijesh Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Pancha
Kripa Sindhu
Vishnavedyo Namo Namah.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Brijesh Prabhu ki jai.
ISKCON Eldoret ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji, and we expect that you will be more and more regular on our forum.
As the devotees in Krishna desire.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Same time tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Kumar Prabhu, are you the host? You can end the recording. Hare Krishna.